Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. Yet again, the Middle East finds itself entangled within a cycle of violence and war, a seemingly endless cycle that is driven by a complex set of issues and problems and is fueled by the darkest of man's emotions. A cycle of violence and conflict that leaves the common man and woman to pay for the sins of those who lead. For all of us who watch the horrors of war unfold before us on the screens that now dominate our lives and are left with the raw emotion of anger and injustice, perhaps now is the time that we begin to ask questions that seek answers. Questions such as, what if humanity were able to find the answer to the question of Palestine? What might be possible? Would finding an answer to this timeless question lead us to the first steps down the path towards the common man and woman's goal of global peace and prosperity? Imagine, just for a moment, a massive solar voltronic network traversing entire deserts and not only producing cheap and plentiful electricity, but also powering an interconnected water supply system that in turn provides the foundation for regional food security, economic stability, and equitable wealth creation. Or perhaps, more simply, perhaps more brutally honest, a simple question might be, when will the men and women within the global leadership community figure out that the endless cycle of violence within the Middle East needlessly dominates global affairs and consumes a massively disproportionate amount of the planet's time and resources? It is questions such as these that the common man and woman are beholden to ask so that this most recent horrific lesson in humanity is not squandered. Because if we do not ask these questions, and the global leadership community continues to fail in garnering any new perspective or point of view, and continues to cling to the two-dimensional lines of thinking and political rhetoric that has fed this endless cycle of war and continues to feed this endless cycle of war, and refuses to examine or even consider any other options, then the cycle of violence and conflict that dominates the Middle East will surely continue. And we will all miss out on a one-time opportunity to fundamentally alter the time arc of humanity. Big problems often require big ideas to solve them. Ideas that upon first glance appear impossible to achieve. Ideas that upon second glance look too complex to execute. Ideas that once grasped and understood become a marvel of ingenuity and simplicity in their ability to solve. If we are to find such a big idea, an idea that leads the global community towards the first steps in solving the question of Palestine and lays the foundation for a viable two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, then we must begin by lowering the temperature of the dark emotions that blind all men and women. Someone once said, before you look outside the box to find a solution to a big problem, first you must look inside the box. Pretty smart. But let's take that bit of wisdom a step further. And before we look inside the box, why don't we take a look at the box itself? But before we do that, for those people who are not familiar with the basic historical timeline of the region and how history affects the current events that now unfold upon your very screen, United Nations has produced a video. I'll leave a link in the description below. I know there's a ton of stuff they've left out, so please don't get caught up in the emotions of right and wrong, and try to stay focused on the fact that single acts of violence led to greater acts of violence, and the cycle of revenge and hatred quickly spiraled out of control into the regional conflict and war that you now see unfolding upon your screens. In other words, please don't spend time trying to figure out what color of paper the box is wrapped in, or if the bow is silk or cotton. It's not important. What is important is the basic structure of the box. The endless cycle of war began with a single act of violence, long since forgotten. All right, now that we have a basic idea of what is inside the box, perhaps the next question we should ask is, should we even bother looking inside the box? Given the fact that this regional crisis has metamorphed into some grotesque humanitarian crisis not just happening in some faraway place and on the screens we stare at is in fact happening within our daily lives by further dividing our society with polarized opinions, consuming resources better spent, and pushing us closer towards some bizarre and childish nuclear war. I think it's safe to say yes, it's critically important that the global community open up the box and begin to look inside. Okay then, let's open it up. Let's see what's inside. Okay. The first thing we see is that everyone is really angry. The level of intolerance and hatred is beyond belief. The Palestinians want to wipe the nation state of Israel off the map, and the Israelis want to ethnically cleanse the remaining Palestinians from what they perceive as their ancestral homeland. It would appear that decades of reciprocal violence has taken an extreme toll on the cultural makeup of both the Israelis and the Palestinians. Neither side is prepared to talk to the other. And even worse, both sides refer to each other as a cancer. The second thing we see is that the Palestinian population is separated into two small land masses. The fact that they're separated into two small land masses makes economic stability, growth, long-term sustainability impossible. As long as there's no possibility for economic stability, the Palestinian population will always be vulnerable to grievance politics, populism, outside bad actors. This fact alone will mean that the Palestinian population will continue to remain a threat to the nation state of Israel. Third, and most importantly, the Palestinians want a share of Jerusalem for their capital, and the Israelis claim that Jerusalem is theirs and theirs alone. They're not even considering sharing it. Did we miss anything? Yeah. Now remember what I said in the beginning. We're looking for the first steps that lead towards the answer to the question of Palestine. We're not looking for the answer itself, just the first steps. No. What about October 7th? I'm not rewarding terrorism. I know. October 7th is a day of mourning for both Palestinians and the Jewish people. The Palestinians have suffered horrifically. Their support for Hamas has been paid in full. They too can hold October 7th as a day of mourning. October 7th is a day of mourning for both the Palestinians and the Jewish people. Okay, what about the two landmass thing? Economy, security thing. And what about sharing Jerusalem? All right. Let's think. Okay, got it. What about if we combine the two Palestinian landmasses? Let the Israelis control security over the singular landmass until the Palestinians are ready to take responsibility for their own affairs. Slowly, gradually transition towards Palestinian security. Slowly, move the two populations closer together. That's stupid. How are you going to do that? Aren't there like 1 billion Israeli settlers in the West Bank? And what about the people in Gaza who don't want to leave? Easy. Ever heard of home swapping? How about we create a massive real estate fund that buys Palestinian and Israeli homes and land and businesses and acts as a financial exchange. The exchange would act as a facilitator for the orderly reorganization of the two separate populations, their homes, their businesses, the land, everything. That's crazy. What about fraud? And plus, do you know how many billions of dollars that's going to cost? What are you going to pay for a bombed Palestinian home that's completely destroyed? Who cares? We're talking about fundamentally altering the timeline of humanity. Are you really going to quibble over a few dollars? That's insane. I'm not rewarding terrorism. The nation state of Palestine will always be a terrorist state, no matter what you say, no matter what you do. No. A Palestinian state would not be an existential threat to the state of Israel if the Palestinians were given but a small share of what they asked for. In fact, Palestinians are only a security threat because the Zionists are making them. They're refusing any sort of consideration of cooperation. The Zionist goal is to simply make things so terrible for the Palestinians that they'll want to leave. Ethnic cleansing done with political correctness. All right. And here's an idea within the big idea that makes everything work. What if we make a statehood deal contingent of being based over 75 years? No acts of violence, no terrorism. Both sides keep walking down the path towards peace, and presto, we have a nation state of Palestine. What about Jerusalem? How are you going to convince the Israelis to let the Palestinians have a share of Jerusalem? Easy. Just think of how a diamond is formed. Time and pressure. First, let's remember the state of Israel is at an inflection point in its timeline. Both the Zionist and the Jewish people must begin to ask themselves one single fundamental question. Do they want to continue to live in a constant state of war that may eventually lead to their downfall? Because the simple fact is that without a reasonable partition of the region of Palestine, there is no Arab state, no Muslim state is going to recognize Israel. Without this recognition, Israel will be alone in an oasis in the desert. Second, if they are truly as smart as they think they are, then surely they must realize and recognize the undeniable facts that expose the fundamental flaw in the Zionist plan. That an insurgency only requires three things. First, it requires an ideology, which the Zionist has provided, men or cadre, which are easy to now find, and it requires arms or funding. None of these the Zionists can stop. So that means the Zionist is faced with a choice. Draw the map now, while they are in the best negotiating position they possibly could have hoped for, and as time passes and each new generation of Palestinian grows less and less full of hate and more full of peace and economic stability, slowly ease them closer and closer in with the understanding that separated by a clearly defined wall, peaceful coexistence is possible. And finally, and perhaps more importantly, if the Palestinians truly want a nation state of their own, then they have but one choice. That one choice is they must renounce violence. Any examination of their current path or plight, or the history of their struggle, clearly indicates that violence and terrorism has not worked. Just as Martin Luther King practiced and preached, so too must the Palestinians. If it is truly a nation state that they desire, then it is non-violence that they must embrace. They must suffer the intolerance and the indignity that the Zionists will inflict upon them. They must understand that it is only through this suffering can they achieve what they truly want, nation state of Palestine. Until they understand this, there can be no nation state of Palestine. If we are to find the answer to the question of Palestine, if we are to begin the first steps of true global peace and prosperity, if we are to advance the human condition beyond this endless cycle of war and violence, it is imperative that both the Zionist and the Palestinian grasp the concept that those who dwell at the gateway between two civilizations will always prosper. Damn, that's a crazy idea, but you know, it just might work. What else you got? I got lots. Just start off by going to mapleproposal.org, download a copy of the proposal. It's in English and in Arabic. It's a step-by-step blueprint on how to separate the Israelis and the Palestinians fairly and equitably using a real estate fund to buy and transfer homes, businesses, land, everything. Water rights, those who remain. It's literally a step-by-step proposal on how to separate the two people. Second, you can head over to the Facebook page. And third, most importantly, if you found this to be interesting, if you found it to be enlightening, or believe in the idea, or just want to help spread the word, help by hitting the like button. That will help the algorithm to learn that this video is something of value and will help it to spread out to other people of like-minded. Alright, that's it. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch the video. Hit the like button so that the algorithm knows that this video has got some value and that others might want to watch it. Have a good day.